If you don't know who I am, my name is 𝗚𝗡𝗜𝗡. I'm the president of the 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. This week, we're actually focusing around SBIR, so I'm collaborating with DoD to bring a lot of good information your way to understand their innovation dollars, et cetera, which we'll get into. I spent 20 years as a government contractor, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's what I want for you. It's what I'm hoping you'll learn a little bit about today as it relates to the process of SBIR. So we're going to dive into this in a second. I want to make sure I got my ducks in a row here. And I'm going to bring on Daniel Carroll here from backstage. And I always have to worry, Daniel, that I'm not like, kicking you out instead of bringing you on. But can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, Neil.
No, that's perfect. And really, Daniel, one of the things, a lot of us don't know who you are. And so this might be a great way for us to just get our conversation started is, can you just give us an understanding of why you personally, right, are in the SBIR world, and what do you like about it as it relates specifically maybe with Air Force?
Sure. I'm the Air Force SBIR program manager for the Air Force Space Force. So I handle all the planning, integration, evaluation, and execution for SBIR. I'm excited by SBIR because I want to work with innovation space and with small businesses. I've done a lot of work through the government and been also on the side of being in a small business. So that was a great tie-in from what I did before with developing research development and now working with small businesses in order to bring their projects into the hands of the warfighter.
You had mentioned U.S. Air Force and Space Force, and I'd be willing to bet there's still a whole bunch of us that don't understand they're different or what is Space Force. And I might pause for a second there. So you're doing SBIR for both those organizations, and they're unique, right?
Yeah, so we're the Department of the Air Force, and there's two services underneath there. There's the United States Air Force, the United States Space Force. What makes it really unique is really the mission sets and the customers there. But there's a lot of overlapping technology between the two, and definitely a big demand for innovation between the Space Force and Air Force.
No, that's perfect. And it's funny, I want to talk about the innovation side, but really sometimes us understanding the Department of the Navy has multiple, or the Department of Air Force has multiple, is just a helpful bonus of learning today. Actually, I end with this question. I figure I'll start with this question with you is, why does the Air Force, Department of Air Force, care about innovation, obviously, but why do they care about the SBIR program? What's in it for the Air Force and the Space Force? I guess that question just stays right there.
We have the most challenging environment that we need to work for with our guardians and the warfighters. We're constantly looking for new innovation technology to improve our weapon systems and the way we do our business. We have Air Force operational imperatives and really describe a broad swath of what our strategy is going after that. But we need improvement in our technologies and processes in order to keep on advancing that. So, Neil, the way you really look at it is that most of our weapon systems, it takes decades to build them. So we're trying to look for small business about what can we leverage from the commercial world, what can we leverage from those ideas in order to gain an advantage there.
Now, so I don't know if you heard me, but I've been in government contracting for 20 years, just even as a small business owner. And when I hear you say certain things, it's just bigger than where I played. For example, I played in the whole business process side of the house. So the operational side, let's say, even in the Air Force. But when I hear you talk about weapon systems, like I think weapon systems, I think Lockheed or somebody, right? Where do small businesses fit into that ecosystem? And, actually what type of companies might be out there that you're trying to attract into the Department of Air Force?
Small businesses are critical to the entire ecosystem. Right now, even just within the DoD, a small business probably makes up over $140 billion within DoD. So that's where, even though there are large businesses that are involved with building the large weapon systems, they really rely on partnering and in small and subcontracts in order to bring in small business, build out components, look at some of these hard areas in order for them to task off and partner with. So it's very critical to have small business built out throughout the entire life cycle, to call it, of a weapon system.
And if I just keep pulling a thread maybe on the innovation that might be attractive to the Air Force, one thing is weapon systems or the suppliers that relate to the weapon systems. But what about the rest of the operational side of the Department of Air Force, if that makes sense?
No, it does. One thing that's an area which is sometimes overlooked for is that within the Air Force Space Force innovation budget for the Small Business Innovative Research is roughly $1.4 billion. So now it's not only looking for the prototypes that we need for the end user warfighter, but also looking at things which we can do in order to improve our infrastructure. What kind of prototypes do we need for the test equipment, the test facilities? What kind of prototype we need to do for the overseeing and coordinating manufacturing? What do we need for the prototypes for our base facilities? So it's more than just what gets in the hand of the user. It's all the supporting systems we need for the warfighter.
And I don't know how hard I'm going to be making these questions on you, but if I pull a thread on the very last one you said, I think on like base facilities, like, can you expand a little bit on some of the things that might fit in that world?
Example is that one of the things we're looking at carefully is that we use commercial. I went to New York. I have commercial auto toll systems. So I just drove right through. It paid the toll automatically. Yeah. We don't have counterparts that getting on and off the base. It's a very methodical process, required to be a methodical process, but it also can be both labor intensive, time intensive for those areas. So what can we do to make that getting in and off the base, tracking the products on the base, tracking the people on the base, tracking activities that are needed? How do we improve that for both the visitors and the warfighters there on the base? That's a simple example about where can we leverage from the commercial world in order to apply it to make our warfighters and guardians better for them, easier. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And that's, Daniel, that was perfect for me being able to relate to it, because when I think of weapon systems, I'm like, how can I get there? But I actually have friends who totally relate to the weapon system side because that's what they do. But for me, that's the world I play in. When I go through a military base, I just show them my ID and they basically wave me forward. Well, if that's the case, then theoretically I should be able to go through and I'm still securing the gate. So that's perfect. So then people like me can look around the entire base and go, well, what other things could be automated? I'm assuming things like, is it robotic process automation? I was hearing about people using robots at a very small level for manufacturing or additive manufacturing type areas. Does that fit into the same potential innovation topics?
Yeah, Neil, I was down at Robins Air Force Base, one of our sustainment centers earlier, and they have a number of SBIRs where they're looking at how to use for both sustainment and what they also need on the base. A lot of the things you can think about is that many of the previous systems were built very custom, very unique to handle a certain niche. A lot of the tooling and commercial products out there, we're trying to figure out how do we open it up to make it that one prototype can solve various needs out there. So there's definitely ways where we're trying to improve how we're using the latest in commercial and manufacturing technology in order to bring that to our bases.
No, that's perfect. And actually, let me ask a quick poll of the audience really quick, just to help Daniel and me understand. For the people who are listening, the question for you is, what is your experience with SBIR? Put 1 into the chat if you've won a SBIR award before. Put 2 into the chat if you've pursued SBIR but haven't had any wins. Put 3 into the chat if you've heard of SBIR but don't know much. And before this week, that was pretty much me. And then put 4 into the chat if you don't know what SBIR is, but you like the idea of money for innovation. So just let us know kind of where you're at in there. If I pull a thread just on Daniel, from the innovation to maybe the topics, where do I have to be in my innovative journey as a small business? How big do I have to be, and how far along does my idea have to be to begin to become attractive or worth knocking on the Department of Air Force's door?
Well, Neil, I think it's never too early to start. I think have those discussions early on. Try to understand what kind of product or innovation you're trying to solve there, and try to line that up with a government need. Within the Air Force, we came up with a process called open topic, where we're basically going and casting out there for what does industry have that's available. And we started that at very small contract awards. It is competitive, but allows them to really quickly say, here's an idea I have. We can evaluate that and start matching up with a potential customer out there.
I'm thinking you might be familiar, and maybe not many people on here will be, but with something called Y Combinator out in Silicon Valley, or 𝗚𝗚. And I think they get tens of thousands of applicants to come in that end up being 150 or 200. So innovators, I think, get used to the highly competitive world of trying to get in. An open topic is an interesting thing I might explore in a minute, but I might ask you about the process. Is the process extremely formal, or can people come in and start knocking on doors early? What's the process for the Department of Air Force for that? SBIR?
Well, most of our information is on appworks.com. So definitely encourage team members to read that. If you're interested, we have recordings on there. We also do live events where we talk about the SBIR program, what the needs of the Air Force's Space Force are. That's a great start, at least getting an idea for that. The SBIR process is competitive, so you will be submitting proposals for that. And each solicitation, we call it, each window has prescribed information about what the small business needs to put in that for that specific application. So yes, it's definitely start with that, but do your homework about how to apply for that window of proposals.
Okay, and appworks.com, that's AFWERX.com.
.com, that's right.
.com. And so actually, so if a bunch of you will put appworks.com in there, let's shout it out so that everybody knows, but make sure you spell it correctly. Okay, so actually just pulling back a little bit on that process of getting in, when you think, like, I know that three general phases of SBIR in the Air Force might be a little bit more specific in the middle, but just on phase one, can you describe, like, what are people getting from that, and what's expected coming out of phase one if I got awarded, or whatever the term is?
Phase one is a short-term feasibility study. So there's what you're trying to do is, at a specific topic, the user will say, I have a need, and feasibility study, you're really trying to describe and really build out about how your innovation or technology can solve that need that a customer has in a specific topic. In an open topic, that's where you're saying, I have a product or idea or concept, and I'm doing feasibility. Is there a military customer out there that matches that? So both are really coming out with that feasibility study about, is there a product market fit for that technology innovation to a military need?
Just why, just out of curiosity, like, if you went with a VC or a 𝗚𝗎 type world, which is kind of the commercial side of looking at SBIR, they're demanding, seeing a prototype right away. Let's get going. Why is phase one not looking for more than just a feasibility study, especially if it's like 6 months?
So see, Neil, I disagree with you. I think it's sometimes when you're looking at, they will ask you to find out what you've done with your customers, doing those 6-month study analysis. So early on, a lot of those accelerators are trying to push you to that, make sure you have the right product, the right customer. So that's what we're really trying to do. We realize there's a lot of opportunity, especially early on, before you make the next level of investment, to make sure you have that right fit. So that's why we're trying to really use that phase one. If you already defined that there's a fit there, then you go into a phase two, compete for phase two. In certain cases for the SBIR work, we also have a direct to phase two, where you skip over phase one.
And what kind of things would qualify or make sense for the Air Force to say, hey, let's go direct to phase two?
That's where we're saying that we already have the customer in mind, and then you have an idea where the prototype will be going to. So that's where there's a little bit, basically that, hey, I've already done the feasibility study, that I know there's going to be a fit there. And so that means it can compete for phase two or direct to phase two.
Daniel, what's the difference between, I observed this from the outside, right? But there's the topics you described and responding formally to them. And then I don't know what they're called, but like AFWERX has these events, and it feels like almost a Shark Tank type event or something. What's the difference between those two types? Because they both seem like they're touching on innovation.
Yes, there's a lot of ways we're trying to do. We're really trying find ways to find the innovation. We're using lots of different processes. So we will have challenges out there. And we'll also have, we work with one of our teams is Spark, which really has an entire network of guardians and warfighters on the base try to solve their needs too. So they're very much interlaced and matched. Then we work close with our joint partners. So we communicate with our joint partners with the both the Army, Navy, Special Operations. We compare notes with them. So we're constantly trying to find out.
Cool.
The SBIR is a very flexible tool, allows us a lot of opportunities. OSD, for example, they came with an opportunity where they're providing 12 releases a year for putting out what the needs of the warfighters out there. 12 times a year that are going to be out there. So we're using all the products we can out there. Again, there's a lot of opportunities, challenges, spark tanks, SBIR, phase 1, phase 2. It can be very daunting, but just take a little bit, do the homework, ask a few questions, come and meet us at events. We go to a lot of the bigger conferences, and we'd love to share you more about what our needs are and how you can use some of these tools.
Actually, I got so many different questions that come out of that. But one thing is where you're talking about come meet us, because that's always, for small businesses, it seems like that's one of the hardest things for small businesses to do is get in the door, have conversations with program office personnel compared to, small business specialists who are very willing to talk, but less tied to the need. And I know that DARPA Connect, for example, has something where people come in and have early conversations before they even meet the program personnel and program managers. Is there something you guys do that, and maybe this is on AFWorks, but something you do that also begins to help us have those initial conversations to say, I think this is a good idea before I respond to an open topic? Can I have a chat with somebody? Or
Sure, there's Air Force Tech Connect. And what that does is much more hard. That it allows to at least start getting a little more steering, a vectoring check, where they'll take your input and try at least to line you up with the Air Force, either a government employee or a military employee who's going to be able to have an interest in that area, probably a little more perspective about where your idea or question fits in. So that's one of the biggest clearinghouse above the AFWorks and above the App Venture side of it. So that's broader than SBIR and broader than the STR programs out there. But that's a entry point for the Air Force to start with the Air Force Tech Connect.
Unfortunately, you and I did a little prep. So that's for people who are writing into chat. This is airforcetechconnect.org. I think I got that right. airforcetechconnect.org, all one word. And actually, really quick, let me ask another quick poll question for folks in the audience. Just tell us about you really quickly. Put a 5 into the chat if you're an existing government contractor in SAM. Put a 6 into the chat if you're not yet in SAM, but you plan on getting into SAM. And put a 7 in the chat if you're wondering who this SAM guy is or what is SAM. It just helps us understand where you're coming from. And we want to, the Department of Air Force, I think, wants to reach people who are not just government contractors, but I think what you call non-traditional vendors.
That's right.
Actually, let's start there for a second. Who do you want to hear from? Because I've heard that term, and I think a lot of us here, we sometimes get confused about, well, what's the difference between a traditional and non-traditional vendor? How would you describe that, Daniel?
Yeah, so for the small business and innovative research, we're definitely more geared towards U.S.-owned small businesses with less than 500 employees. One of the things we're trying to do with the open topic is trying to reach out to all existing team members that are building a commercial product that we can leverage. So that's one idea. That's why we typically think of a non-traditional, someone who's already has a track with we call it a dual use capability. They we use both for the government or also the commercial side. So that's one area. But also for the topic, we realize there's some unique aspect of military requirements that may just be a military need. So we also encourage that too for a small business to go into where they're trying to develop a military capability and start off with that too. So those are the two areas we're looking at, both non-traditionals, also people who are familiar with government contracting or the government products.
Yeah, it was funny. I was part of it wasn't SBIR probably, or maybe it was, but when I was in the Army back in the early 90s, I was in the Rangers, and we were the first ones to get this thing called a GPS. And it gave you your location within 30 clicks or something. It was pretty broad compared to what it is today with my kids or something. But all that technology, whether it's inside or out, is really helpful. I got a question yesterday that I might as well ask you because you touched on it already, where you work with the other services within DoD. Do you ever collaborate in the same way with like NASA if they come up with something through phase one over there that you look at here, or does it tend to stay only in the DoD?
No, not all. When we look at some of our largest programs, we definitely have leveraging outside funding sources and outside partnerships. So we're definitely in the Air Force side. We do work with NASA and we look for opportunities there. The SBIR is a great flexibility program that you actually can do what's called a program transfer. So you can do a transfer between various sponsors out there. So we topic transfer and program transfer. So we look at topic transfer where the NASA may already have an existing technology or capability that we may be able to apply. We also work within the health community is another area where we looked at where there's overlap between what Defense Health Agency is doing, what the Air Force Surgeon General is doing, and what the National Institute of Health is doing. So we look a lot of those areas where we combine where we say we either have a need and we try to partner with the within the government for that need, or we say, hey, there's a solution which someone else will find. We can leverage that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, and that's good too to hear the broader. I'll go look at that transfer side of it because that's what a lot of us wonder. If we're starting in one place, does it go somewhere else? Another big challenge I've seen people have, and I first heard about this when Naval X first got stood up with this idea. If I'm talking to somebody in the field, like some company commander about a need, and we're talking about things down there, but they really have no control over, what happens with it. What I liked coming out of the, if I call it the works program across the board, is your ability to guide us and guide that company commander to somebody who can actually turn it into a reality. So this is good stuff. Can I ask you, Daniel, you had talked about, and it's perfect that you have this on your name there. You've got AF Ventures and then you got AFWorks. Is there a difference? And if so, what's the difference between them?
Sure. So we're a component of AFWorks. AFWorks is really looking at commercialization and non-traditional. We're focusing on the small business and the small business innovative research part of it. So there's other part of AFWorks that looks into, for example, like larger business or non-traditional business, or also international side of it. That's where we're scoping off. We're really using the SBIR funds and process for that. We work closely with our other divisions. We're both looking at non-traditional such as Prime. We're also looking at Spark. We're looking at the warfighter problems. Also, SpaceWorks is really dedicated towards the space mission set. So we're just another larger component. AFWorks also falls underneath the Air Force Research Lab. So we combine with all the other directorates underneath the Air Force Research Lab to help meet their needs, also partner with them on hard problems.
Now, I talk about DoD's got 2.5 and seed funding kind of thing. It's like, a really simple way of looking at it. But when you look at that number, Air Force has got huge amount of it out there. Can we talk about the money for 1 second? Because, for innovators and entrepreneurs, that's a thing that's attractive. The first question I have is just, when I look through the phases, what's the range of investment, if you will, that can come out of the SBIR into a small business innovator?
Yeah, so let's start with the phase two. Phase two can go up to $2 million. We normally at phase two are somewhere around $1.25 million for phase two. And then below that, when you start off with a phase one is somewhere around $100,000 to $120,000. It varies depending on the solicitation and the need. Again, those are various parameters we can work within. That's where you're thinking about is that a phase one is a short-term effort, is under 100,000, roughly around that point. A phase two, you're building out a prototype that may go up to 2 years. That might be $2 million. After you get a phase two, you can also be competitive. A sponsor can submit an application for what we call a tactical funding increase or a strategic funding increase. A TACFI can bring another $1.9 million. And a STRATFI could be a total package of up to $60 million.
60?
$60 million.
So when you say sponsor, what is that? Or just expand on that.
It's an Air Force end user. So all these are required to, after you get through the phase one into a phase two, you need to have a government technical point of contact. But beyond that, then we're looking for also to transition the prototype, working with a military end user in order to take your prototype and move into what you probably heard as a phase 3. Phase 3 is one of the areas to really move it into where it's being of use, being of applied, being a product that the warfighter can use. So that's where we're really taking our research development dollars and transitioning into a phase 3 with the end user.
And just pulling it through a little bit more on the sponsor, because it seems like I'm a sales guy as well, and I always look out and go, what do I need downstream? Oh, well, I'm a project manager too. It's the same thing. Sponsors, and I know the answer might be depends, but are sponsors at a certain level, like you generally would expect a sponsor would be sitting at a, I don't know, 06 or higher type level, or?
No, typically it's not that they're necessarily at a certain level. What you're really dividing, we're in the military, is typically the division between the responsibility. So now you're looking at typically within one lane would have the acquisition responsibility, to acquire a product. And then you also have a need, the actual end user of the product who operates and uses that product. They work together. Typically, they're two separate organizations that are collaborating on that in order to make sure that there's a customer need that's out there, and there's a customer ability to end user in order to acquire that need and meet that. So you have the need, you have the resources, and you have the funding in order to close that loop. So that's why we're thinking about, we build out the prototype through a phase 2, then the small business needs to work with the end customer in order to make sure they can carry that into the next phase.
No, that's perfect. And I might ask, we're kind of wrapping up. We got 27, so it's a lot of time, as we drop to 12:30. But what's an ideal company for? Let me tee this up a little bit, Daniel. But what's an ideal company in the Department of Air Force for SBIR, in particular, from the standpoint of which ones typically, what traits maybe we have that lead to successful experiences within SBIR? And maybe what's a trait or two that really you've got to watch out for, you're going to fail coming in, knocking on the Air Force's door?
Yeah, let's start with that first one, is that what we've seen is the challenges with a small business. They believe this one-stop, one-shop, area, that all of these are highly competitive, both within the Air Force, Space Force, and also across the SBIR. They are highly competitive. So you need to make sure that you be able to look at that solicitation and be able to adjust and realize that there will be other solicitations out there. As I mentioned, the Department of Defense is scheduling 12 different releases. Of those 12 releases, Air Force and Space Force are probably going to be playing in probably 8 to 10 of those releases during a calendar year. So there's going to be 8 to 10 different opportunities for you to engage and look for those areas. Not only the Air Force, but you also have the Navy, Army, DARPA. You also have all the non-DoD agencies out there. So that's one thing which I found, that some of the challenges, if a small business says they're going to latch into a single opportunity out there as a one-shot, they don't have a lot of success because it's highly competitive. 2 is also make sure you read the instructions. That's where we don't want to disqualify you, but if it says it needs to be in at a certain time, make sure the application's at a certain time. If it has all the documents you need, make sure it has all the documents you need. Building upon that, so if you make sure you look at multiple opportunities, make sure you read specifically what's in that opportunity. Third is that make sure you look at all the opportunities out there to be able to leverage your product, work with multiple customers. When you get to this, where you get to a phase 1 or phase 2, you will typically have a technical point of contact. Work with them in order to find out other avenues for using your product and your capability and innovation. So that's where we've seen people have been successful, where they've taken a single direct to phase 2 award, and then after that, they've gone through and had 27 different phase 3 opportunities from 27 unique customers, be able to leverage that.
No, that's amazing. So we're close to where we're at the bottom of the time, but I'm going to come back in 1 second to ask you what's the one thought you leave us with. But I did want to just remind everybody, and again, first off, thank you very much, Daniel, for coming in, because I've been through, this is my 4th one in this week alone, and I just learned a ton listening to you as well. But remember, for everybody out there, AFWorks.com, And the other one is, I think it's AF Tech Connect, right?
Air Force.
Air Force TechConnect.org. Remember those two. That's the stepping off point. As much as I'm sure Daniel will be willing to, take calls and make interest or something, start with those resources. Do your homework. That way, when you're coming in, you're never asking a question like, what does AFWORK stand for? Or something like that. And if I throw away for a second, just with one thought, whatever that is, what would that be?
Hey, first of all, Neil, thanks again for this time. One thing we're really excited having small businesses out there. We really want to partner them. And I want to say, try not to think of that as a $1.4 billion of opportunities, but just think about it can leverage that into bigger things for our warfighter, our military set. And also what we'd like to see be able to leverage for commercial opportunities. That's one of the things that's driving through SBIR is leverage, not just for purely military, but leverage dual use. So the one thing I want to say, try not to think of it as a daunting environment. We're here to help. We're trying to find out opportunities to take your innovation and process and technologies to our warfighter. We're doing what we can. If you have questions, come and talk to us at our Ask Me Anything. Come and meet us at events. Go to appworks.com. We have a couple of mailing org boxes that ask your questions. So we're excited about having the partnerships and collaboration with small business and get the technology innovation out there.